Okay, I know you said you have not seen any readers reading your book, but I know a lot of bloggers have.
Yeah.
I'm one. So, but do you pay attention to the reviews?
I tried to pay attention to reviews for about 15 minutes, and then I wanted to crawl under my bed and cry, so I stopped. I try not to read them. I'm lucky in that it's gotten to the point where I couldn't read all of them, even if I tried, so I try not to read them. I sometimes read like a paragraph or something. There's one I nominated for a Kitschy Award, so they do like I'm nominated for a Golden Tentacle for debut. It's like a sci-fi fantasy award, and they do reviews as part of the awards. And I read that, and that was actually a really like interesting review that I just read recently. It's really thoughtful and Shakespearean. So like that. So once in a while I'll read something, and then I think I could find a review that completely contradicts another review, and then find 5 more reviews that completely contradict everything they said. It would make me nuts to try to read everything. I love that people are reading it, and I love that people are talking about it, but like I will drive myself crazy if I try to keep up with things, and like people are mean, and I'm still not used to people being mean about something that I wrote. And the skin is getting thicker every day, but it's still not that thick. So I have kind of avoided reviews. I have even some of the big professional reviews I haven't read. I read my Washington Post Ron Charles review because he is a lovely man, and I still regret that I didn't get to meet him. He came to my event in D.C. He live tweeted my event in D.C. and I didn't get to meet him. But I got a email from my editor that was pretty much here is your New York Times review. You might not want to read it. So I said, okay. I didn't read it. I have never read it. I probably won't read it. I think one of the nicest, and going back to bloggers, when I was still during that window when I was actually reading things, one of the nicest reviews was from a blogger, who was also a bookseller, said it's not a book for everyone. And I think it's one of the nicest things to say about it, like just to specify it, because I don't think there are books for everyone. Like, reading a book is such a personal experience, and it's going to be different for everyone, and people are it's like, I feel like assuming everyone's going to love a book, it's like assuming everyone's going to fall in love with the same person, which is just absurd. So I love that so many people are falling in love with this book. I am not surprised at all that there are people who maybe don't love it quite the same way or don't like it at all. But I wish they weren't all talking about it where they showed up in my Google alerts, which I had to shut off. I shut off my Google alerts like mid-September because I couldn't take it anymore. So I think the aspect of the internet makes it a little difficult to kind of distance myself sometimes. So I'm still getting a hang of this. No one tells you how to be an author. Like, no one tells you, you maybe want to shut your Google alerts off. You kind of have to learn as you go. So it's been an interesting experience. But I love how many bloggers are talking about it, and meeting book bloggers. It's great. I wish I read enough to be a book blogger. Someone has a great cell phone ring, by the way. Yes.
So mine's a plot question.
Okay.
And I read the book a little bit ago.
Can I answer it in a spoiler-free way?
I don't know.
Okay, we'll try.
You can refuse to answer.
Okay.
And I cannot think of her name. I'm having a complete brain.
So someone will help.
The young woman that walked in front of the bus or a tram.
There's a train, and this is spoilery. We shouldn't tell you who it is.
Yeah.
People haven't read the book.
Walked in front of the
At
train.
some point, there's a train.
My first question.
At some point, it ends badly.
Was it accidental, or didn't she look up and see a man arguing with a man, but she couldn't identify
I'm not
going to
be able to answer any of this. I think there's a lot of, I don't think anyone will really ever know exactly why that happened.
Okay, because I wanted to know if I really missed...
You didn't miss anything.
I have my own theory.
Okay. I was going to say, I think it's a very theoretical sort of exactly what happened and how intentional it was. I think is kind of up for debate. I think there are a lot of things that are up for debate. I think people ask, well, when this happened or when this happened, it's I don't necessarily know. And there are a lot of, and I think one of the kind of themes about the book is how much people affect other people and how much one action can cause so many other things, even if it's indirect. And so I think there's not a clear cut, yes, this is why this happened. And one of the things about the book and where I ended up starting the book is I everything that happened, I tried to trace back to the earliest point, and that's where it starts. Like, because the book at the very, very beginning starts with a death, and had that not happened, none of it would have happened at all. So I think there's a little bit of, like, everything's up for debate in its own sort of way, but you know, that particular incident, I don't think there's a clear answer for. Yes?
I thought, I mean, going on, I have more and more questions. One thing is your description of your process has been very eye-opening to me, reading it, in that you created the scene long before you created the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that explains a lot to me after reading it. Another thing, and you might think I'm crazy, and I wish I could remember the name of the book. There was a book, about 10 or so years ago. It was a Civil War novel where it followed the story of a Confederate soldier and a Union soldier who was leaving and going back home. Does anybody remember the name of this book?
Leave me in the book.
Cold Mountain?
That's what I was going to say.
Cold Mountain, that was it. Because it would go, with one story. And I thought your book, had a lot of plot, action, description. I don't know if it was that consistent, but I just throw that out there. That was one of the things that I actually thought about as I went through the book, because there would be activity, and then there would be some detailed description of a tent, for example, or a scene or whatever, where really nothing would particularly happen, but there would be, detailed and beautiful descriptions.
I think this is why I get categorized as literary sometimes, because there are those parts where nothing happens. But I don't think I'd ever did that purposely. It definitely started with all the description. A lot of the plot was layered into it. I think maybe that's why it has that sort of back and forth, because I knew I wanted to keep a lot of the description in the setting, because it was a very setting-based book for me. And when I was working on it, I was revising it. Once I started revising it, talking to my agent, one of the things he said, which is, and no one ever told me what to do, which I think sometimes you just think like an editor or an agent, and if they're giving you editorial advice, tells you what to do. No one ever told me what to do. People told me what wasn't working and let me figure out how to fix it myself. And one of the things he said was that the circus needed to be more of a setting and less of a focus. But I had all of those descriptive passages, and I wanted to be able to incorporate them as much as possible, and I wanted you to be able to see as much of the circus as you could without really taking that time to walk you through every little piece. So I hope I found a good balance of actually having things happen.
No, it was. I didn't get tired of the description.
Okay.
So, but another thing, which is, it's not really plot-oriented. I mean, you've already mentioned the fact that from the beginning there was no competition. I raised a question about a third or halfway through the book to someone else who had read the book, my wife, and said, "Who are you rooting for?" And I think that's an interesting concept, because it would be interesting to know if people were rooting for one competitor
Can
for
we
another.
poll? Did people choose sides? I've never actually thought about this before.
I chose a side.
Really?
Oh, clearly chose a side. I just wonder if
I never had anyone really talk about that sort of aspect. I didn't know people were thinking.
At some point it becomes, the sides become more confusing and...
It gets complicated.
Yeah, but and that's why I'm curious to see how the movie comes out.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
And to what control you have over that, because...
So who'd you pick?
Well, I don't know, can I say?
Well, are we going to judge you for...
Because, you said don't divulge...
Give anything away. Just Don't give anything away.
Yeah.
Just say your name and decide.
What character?
Oh, I was clearly rooting for Celia.
Okay, that's allowed. And that's
Yeah.
fair. I'm trying to think of who I would if I had to choose a side. I don't think I'd be able to pick.
The competition plays a vital part of the novel, but it's not the only part of the novel. And at times you're kind of in the dark of what the competition really is.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of seems like even though it's a main focus point, it's a backstory. Was that because you weren't sure what the competition was?
I knew what the competition was, and I think it's kind of described a little bit toward the end. I think I didn't want to get into too much of the details because I want to answer this very spoilery, so catch me afterwards. I'll give you a better answer. But no, it was one of those things where, like, I liked the idea of playing with a conceit where you were in a competition that, as a player, you didn't necessarily understand the rules or, like, the end game even. You were just told this is what you have to do. And I thought about, like, if you were growing up with this and this is just sort of your status quo, like, how long does it take until you're like, wait a second? And then is it too late because you're already in it? And